Let's be honest, some people hate tracking their calories. You've been told that to lose weight, you need to pick up your phone, you need to download MyFitnessPal, and you need to track every morsel of food and everything you drink. Otherwise, there's no chance you're going to lose weight. I'm here to tell you that's a complete lie. I've worked with busy professionals for over a decade, and to your dismay, calorie tracking is not the number one tool I use in order to help these people to lose weight. Now, if calorie tracking works for you, brilliant. But it's just one method of many that allows us to lose weight. A lot of the clientele I work with don't have the time or don't have the patience to simply track everything they eat. They have busy careers, busy families. They don't have much time at all throughout the day. And that's fine. Maybe if you're a 20-something influencer where you're at university and you can prep all your meals and you have all the time in the world, this method may be great for you. But to say it's the only way to lose weight is downright wrong. And by the end of this video, you're going to get a clear picture of how to lose weight without tracking calories. You see, to lose weight, we need to create what's known as a calorie deficit. And two words which have gone very popular on social media over the last few years, and rightly so. It's cut out all the bullshit about how weight loss occurs. We don't need to take a certain supplement. Although people still think these things, it's become less. A calorie deficit, in very simple terms, is burning more calories than we take in, okay? We can do that by modifying our nutrition or adding more exercise or doing a little bit of both, which is what most people are going to do. Alternate nutrition, we have lots of different methods to create a calorie deficit, which in simple terms is to eat less calories. Now, don't get that confused with eating less food, and we're going to go into that in a minute. That's one of the mistakes people make. You may have heard of other popular ways to lose weight. Let's think of carnivore. Let's think of intermittent fasting. Let's think of the keto diet. Let's think of the Mediterranean. Insert your popular one here. All these methods are simply ways of getting someone to eat less calories. But we also want to be aware of what happens with weight loss, which is increased hunger, decreased satiety after we eat. So all of these things, we need to create a plan that when we're starting off, will help check these boxes and keep all these things in check as we go on a quote-unquote diet, or as we go on a calorie deficit, as we go on a weight loss plan, whatever way you want to think of it. Most popular diets will work very short term. They create a calorie deficit. They get you to eat less calories, but they don't satisfy these other aspects of our physiology that happen as we lose weight. Not only the physiological effects of getting hungrier and getting decreased satiety or decreased fullness after we eat, but then you can add in the psychological aspects of trying to stay on a calorie deficit. Too much restriction is the human nature. Don't think of the white polar bear, don't press the red button. Too much mental restriction will cause us to actually want that more. So we have our physiological and we have the psychological effects that we both need to think about. Some of the reasons that people don't like to track their calories, it kind of feels like homework, which again, these busy professionals don't need anymore. Can be exhausting, can be hard to track everything. You're eating at restaurants, you are eating at different cafes, especially as a busy professional. There's lots of business dinners. You don't know how much in grams is in that big steak you've just ordered, and it potentially is not sustainable in the long term. Okay, we've heard lots of people, and you may yourself be watching this or listening to this, that have tried for a period of time to track their calories but simply can't keep that up, like any habit in the long term. Here's one life-changing tool that I give my clients. At the end of this video, you're going to learn when, if ever, you need to do calorie track and when it can be useful. One method I use is the plate method. When I was feeding my daughter when she was very young and she could start to eat solids, if you look at the baby plates, they're divided into thirds, and that's exactly what I do for the adults. Think of your plate, divide it into a third. A third of that plate we want to be a lean animal protein. For example, chicken breast, maybe a lean steak, some kind of fish, eggs. Obviously, if you're not vegan, We want to get some kind of animal protein in there. The leaner the better. That's why potentially chicken and white fish are going to be the leanest out of all these. That's our number one. So when you're at a restaurant or you're eating out in a cafe or you're at a food court, the first thing you need to look at is, where can I get a good source of protein? Most places, like especially if you look in food courts, they're pretty stingy on the protein. So you may need to ask for extra protein to satisfy this. Now you might ask, why do I need to eat protein? You've obviously heard from the effects we need to build muscle, maintain muscle, to tone up. That's ones that are obviously vital during a weight loss phase, because we need to maintain whatever muscle we have as we lose the fat around it. That's going to mean by the end of that journey, we're going to end up with less fat and the same amount or maybe more muscle. That's going to give us that tight and toned and lean look, which we all want. But not only that, if you think of diets such as the Atkins diet, carnivore, or even keto, the reasons these diets came into effect, well, the first one being the Atkins diet when it became so popular, is because they structured around a high protein diet. And when you're using a high protein diet and proteins from animal protein, not just protein powders or protein bars, which I'll explain in a second, animal protein is very satiating, so it's going to keep you full, which means you're less likely to eat very high calorie food, which means overall, you haven't really focused on eating less calories. You've just focused on eating more protein, but that in turn has caused you to eat less overall calories than you were eating before, because you're less hungry, you're more satiated, and you're craving high calorie food. Let's just say processed or junk food. Not that we can't have it, but it's higher calorie and it doesn't really fill us up. That's the whole point of it. And it creates such a big dopamine hit in the brain, because very smart food scientists create this food so we overeat on it. So it creates a big dopamine response in our brain, and that dopamine response overrides our appetite. It hijacks neurochemistry. We've evolved in times of food scarcity, so any high calorie food will create a big dopamine response. And obviously they have taken that to the next level, where they can get into labs and combine the right sugar and fat together, and then colorings and textures to create a dopamine response we've never seen before. So you can just overeat on those foods. So when we've eaten more protein, we haven't focused on eating less food, but we've eaten less calories overall. That's the goal. So that's why we need our protein, a third of it. A third of that plate is going to be some kind of vegetables, okay? You've heard when people are seen or tried yourself, when people are trying to lose weight, they always have like chicken salads or Caesar salads, all that kind of stuff, okay? We want vegetables in there for the similar reason to protein, although it works in a different way. Veggies contain a lot of fiber. They're made up of fiber, and fiber will slow down how long it takes for us to kind of digest food and filter it through. It blocks that digestive system up. Also, vegetables are made up of a lot of water, okay? So when we have a lot of water and a lot of fiber, that's going to give us the feeling that we're fuller and keep us fuller for longer. Thus, we end up eating less high calorie food. Thus, we end up eating less overall calories. Okay, now when we're talking about vegetables, we want to kind of look at not just lettuce salad, lettuce leaves and stuff like that. We want to look at very filling sources of vegetables. Let's think of broccoli, let's think of green beans, let's think of Brussels sprouts if you haven't been scarred from your childhood eating them. And again, they're sources of vegetables that contain a lot of water, contain a lot of fiber, take us a long time to chew. Again, another way that we're gonna be fuller, because when we eat really high calorie food, you know, you can polish a ridiculous amount of calories in a mouthful. And that's not giving your brain enough time for the signals to come from your stomach to your brain to tell you you're full. Versus when we actually eat these healthier foods, it takes us longer to chew, and thus we don't finish our meal very quickly and crave high calorie food. Protein and fiber together are the gold standard. We're going to get both of these hunger negating effects to keep us full, to keep us more satiated, to stop us craving more high calorie food. And the last thing, we want some kind of complex carbohydrate in there. Not complex in the emotional sense, but complex meaning just say healthy carbohydrate. So when people have gone on like low carb diets, and that's why you say, Sean, I didn't know we're supposed to eat carbohydrates. When people have gone on low carbohydrate diets, again, it's another way of just cutting out calories. A lot of the Western world, we're eating a lot of, let's say, processed carbohydrates. So when people have gone on these plans, they've just eating more whole foods, less processed foods, and that's just one way of cutting down calories. But we don't want to eat less of the healthy source of carbohydrates. We want to eat a little bit less of the processed ones. The healthy ones being, let's say, brown rice, sweet potato, pumpkin, potato, wholemeal pasta. Again, those kind of foods are going to contain a lot of fiber, thus help us play into keeping us full and satiated. And obviously lots of micronutrients in all those different types of foods. And also carbohydrates, if we're training, are going to be a great source of energy. They're going to be our best source of energy. And as well as that, that's not tying into that restrictive type of plan where we cut out things completely and we can never have it again, because that's not good either. So this is a simple plate structure that you can take to any restaurant, take to any cafe, take to any food court, and you don't have to be stuck to your phone stressing about that you can't track those calories. Because if I get someone and they simply eat 3 of those meals, I'm going to assume in most cases that's going to be overall less calories than before, especially in the long term. Because yes, you may get on a diet and restrict your calories to a ridiculous level, but you can't sustain that. But if I give someone and fill them with these foods, very, very filling foods, 3 times a day, I'm going to put my money on that's going to be less calories than before. And that's where simply healthy eating comes into play. We eat more healthy foods. Healthier foods contain less calories overall than processed foods. They keep us full, and thus that's going to tie into eating less calories. Now you may say, Sean, where's the fats? Fat is a other kind of macronutrient, macro meaning main. Fat in general, like olive oil, avocado, nuts. If you're eating some kind of protein, that's generally going to be cooked in a type of fat, okay? Hopefully a really good source, olive oil or butter, ghee, or a really healthy source, coconut oil. So we don't need to add extra fats. Fats is probably the one thing compared to protein and carbs that contains double the calories. So fats are absolutely brilliant. They're essential, but we just need a little bit to get kind of a little bit at each meal to get the nutrients from that and to get the right effect, okay? Fat in small dosage, again, can delay the digestion process and potentially slow everything up a little more, again, leaving us more satiated and more full. That's going to be our 3 main meals. So for a busy professional, that's generally what I'm going to start with. As they do this, they're going to crave less sugary foods, crave less high calorie foods. And especially in the day of a busy professional, they're stressed a lot. They're probably used to skipping meals, high stress, skipping meals, decision fatigue. All this stuff ties into them making bad choices and then craving high calorie food and then stress eating. Let me give you a little example of this. For breakfast, this may be 2 or 3 eggs, and this may be some cucumber, and again, depending, it could be a slice of wholemeal toast, or it could be even a bit of fruit or some berries. For lunch, that may be chicken, as we said, green beans and some brown rice, and then for dinner, that may be steak or salmon or some white fish, some roasted sweet potato, and some steamed greens. Okay, no measuring, no logging, just balanced meals using this structure. That's how I'll start someone on. Then what you're going to do is simply look at your weight. A weight goal in regards to weight loss, we want around 1% of body weight a week. So if someone's 80 kilos, around the percent, they're 800 grams. Now that could be 400 to 800, we'll take that. So 0.5% to 1% of body weight. Okay, it just depends. Potentially women, as research, may lose a little bit slower, but the main thing is we're losing it. So you're going to eat those 3 meals. You're going to start on that anyway. If you prefer 2 meals, okay, then go 2 meals of that. You may need those 2 portions to be bigger, obviously, as if you're having 3 meals, just divided into 2. Get your activity level, your steps, and how much training you're doing, and then just look at your weight. And then what you need to do, if you're not losing enough, ask yourself, can I increase my activity a little bit more, my steps and or my training, to be able to create a little bit more of a calorie deficit? Because most people like food, so they would rather train a bit more than to be a bit more flexible in nutrition. Definitely the people I train, and definitely myself. And then you want to see if that weight is dropping on your target each week or every fortnight. And then if it's not still and you've maximized your activity level, then we can go back to our nutrition, make sure there's no extra calories creeping in there from like beer, sugary drinks. If there is, we want to switch those to low calorie drinks to save a few more calories. And if that weight's still not dropping enough, then we can switch out kind of the proteins we're eating for more leaner sources of protein. For example, chicken and white fish instead of steak every night. Again, steak is brilliant food, but steak and salmon, those are just higher fat foods, so they can contain a little bit more calories. And then we can swap out the carbohydrates we're eating for more leaner sources, for example, sweet potato and pumpkin. They're going to be lower calorie. But I'm pretty confident that you'll just lose weight alone with that meal structure. And if you get to the stage down the line where you've done all this, you have all the big rocks and big habits in place, you have a perfect meal structure, you're training regularly, and then you want to go and dial it in a little bit more, then you may go and track your calories for a week or two just to get an estimate of where you're at. And if you need how many calories you need for weight loss, simply get your body weight in pounds and multiply it by around 10. 12 if you're active, 10 if you're normal, 8 if you're really sedentary. And that will give you an indication. But as said, I start with this plate structure for the majority of people, and I don't need to move away on it in most cases. I get this plate structure, then I'll go and increase that person's activity as best as possible. That's going to be my approach in the majority of cases. And then we'll simply look at other ways that people overconsume when they're stressed, when they haven't slept. And we're going to optimize those parts of someone's lifestyle to prevent them overeating because of those things. Okay, so we have all these things we need to take into account for a busy professional. So there you go. That's my approach. Kind of dialed into a few minutes. Please watch and listen to my other podcasts and videos where we'll go over every single different aspect. But as I said, I wanted to get across my biggest approach to help busy professionals lose weight in regards to nutrition that isn't calorie tracking.